Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Backus.
And I'm Kevin Paulin, and welcome to the Falling Up Podcast, where we have conversations about turning obstacles into opportunities. And on today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by Miss Barb Nangle.
Barb is a boundaries coach, a speaker, and a writer. She's also the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. She has one more role, and that is she has a really great podcast called Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery.
I thought the conversation with Barb was enlightening as she shared her journey of codependence as well as setting healthy boundaries and the correlation of recovery and entrepreneurship. So we went down a lot of different avenues, and I'm sure this is one of those episodes that's going to provide tangible advice for people to improve their life and live productive lives.
A lot of hidden gems.
A lot of hidden gems. So with that, welcome to the Falling Up Podcast.
Can you kind of share your personal journey that led you to 12-step recovery at the age of 52?
Yeah, absolutely. So I hit what's called the codependent bottom and didn't know what that was. In the early spring of, I almost said 1952. What? 2015. So do you guys know that Abraham's Tent Project, the New Haven area project to house homeless people in the overflow from Columbus House in the different churches?
This is where I met him.
He's working at Columbus House.
I was a housing specialist at Columbus House.
Okay. This is so cool because normally I tell people they're not from New Haven. They don't know Abraham's Tent.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So I volunteered to be the co-chair for the Abraham's Tent for my church.
Oh, okay.
For that season. Mm-hmm. And right when that happened, this homeless guy named Dan came to the church as a parishioner, and we became pretty tight. And I was like, oh, this is like a divine intervention that the universe is bringing me a homeless person to me as a friend, so that when I'm serving homeless people, they're like people, not like the homeless. And it felt like this divine intervention, and we became very friendly. And a few months into our friendship, one night during a snowstorm, I invited him to stay in my home, and he did. And then he stayed another time, and within a few weeks, he was practically living with me. And I eventually felt trapped in my own home. He was an alcoholic, an addict, potentially also a narcissist, and he fucked with my head in a way that nobody ever had. And one day I was in therapy, and I was talking about him, and in mid-sentence, I stopped and I went, oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon? And my therapist was like, yes. So let me just define a couple terms in case people don't know. Codependent. It's kind of like a constellation of things, but essentially a codependent person is someone who's focused on whatever's outside of themselves, typically other people, what those people are doing, thinking, feeling. We're typically like rescuers, fixers, savers, helpers, bend over backward kind of people. And what was the other word that I just wanted to define?
Potentially Al-Anon.
Oh, Al-Anon. Okay, so Al-Anon, for those who don't know anything about 12-step recovery, let me just start with Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the mother program of all 12-step programs. It started in 1939, and it was the first time in history when droves and droves and droves of people were able to recover from addiction. And the very next 12-step program that was created was Al-Anon, which is for loved ones of alcoholics. And the reason that loved ones of alcoholics need their own 12-step recovery program is the things that we think to do that seem sort of natural to, quote, help our addicts and alcoholics are actually things that backfire. So they end up enabling those people. They end up centering that person rather than themselves, so they neglect themselves. So many, many, many codependents are members of Al-Anon. So I had heard of Al-Anon, had never heard the term codependent. My therapist is like, yes. So I go home, go to Mrs. Google, don't know what I put in, but I'm looking for Al-Anon, and the word codependent comes up. And I'm like, what? How is this possible? That I'm 52 years old. I've read, I don't know, a gajillion self-help books. I've been in therapy since I was 15, not continuously, but close. I've done workshops, workbooks, work groups, retreats, spiritual things, group therapy, physical fitness, health, like you name it. Like I'm trying. Never heard this word codependent. And I go back to my therapist and I'm like, listen, I don't feel like I got hit in the head with a baseball with this news that I'm codependent. I feel like I got hit in the head with a planet. Like, what the fuck else don't I know about myself? How is it possible this gigantic thing is true about me? And I don't know. It was almost like an identity crisis.
Was there, and sorry for interjecting, but was there any resistance to that idea?
Oh, hell no.
So it was
no, I was
immediate.
like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it took a while to wrap my mind around
Sure.
everything that is codependence, but I was like, well, yeah. So my therapist says to me, Barb, I think that codependence is actually a unifying concept. It pulls together a whole bunch of things that you did know about yourself. You just didn't know they were related. So I started going to Codependence Anonymous, and I almost immediately felt a sense of relief. I think part of it was knowing there's a thing that describes me that covers all these things. There's a recovery program. And other people get it, and there's a possible way to recover. And also just started learning a tiny little bit of tools of how to manage my life in a way that weren't codependent. And one of the first things that I came up with, and I don't know where I came up with this idea, I think I need to be reparented. But I didn't know that was a thing. I thought I made that up. 6 weeks into my time in Codependence Anonymous, I go to Cape Cod to visit my good friends, Tim and Heidi. Heidi had been in AA for many years and had just for years talked about how radically her life had been improved by it. So I start telling her about CODA. And she says, while you're here, let's see if there's a CODA meeting and we'll go together. So she couldn't find one, but she found an ACA meeting. So ACA is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And some people refer to it as ACOA, which I had heard of, but I had heard of it as long as I can remember. I didn't really understand, why do adult children of alcoholics need a group? I don't know. It never occurred to me that I would qualify. And I had never heard the and dysfunctional families part of the title. So she's like, well, there's an ACA meeting. Let's go. And I'm like, I'll go for her because her dad's an alcoholic. She's an actual adult child of an alcoholic. And I walk in and they say, we reparent ourselves. And I was like, hold the phone. What? And then they read this list of the 14 traits of an adult child, which is affectionately called the laundry list. And I was like, oh my God, these are my people. Now, Heidi tells me that I sobbed through the whole meeting. I don't remember that, but I bought the literature. And I came home to New Haven and I started going to an ACA meeting. And a few weeks later, another ACA meeting for women started in that same building. And I started going to that. And then a few weeks later, I started doing the 12 steps with 3 other women in that group. And I continued to go to CODA. So for a year, I did both of those programs. And then after a year, I really felt like that for me, CODA was maybe a 75% fit, whereas ACA 100% fit. And I also was really seeing and feeling and experiencing recovery in ACA, and I just was not in CODA.
Can you define that feeling of recovery?
It's so many multi-layered and multifaceted and ever evolving. So I didn't know that I was not comfortable in my own skin until I became comfortable in my own skin. But I think that is ultimately what it's about. I lived with a sense of urgency 24/7. Didn't know it until it was gone. It's like those kinds of things that you don't like. If you had said to me, do you have peace? I probably would have said yes. No, I didn't.
Right. Well, it's one of those things, right? The saying, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have a reference point, hey, if the spiciest thing I've ever eaten is a jalapeno, well, I think that is this utterly world spice. And then I get introduced to a habanero, or I get introduced to a ghost pepper, and all of a sudden now I know spicy, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's fascinating that, and I think that is something that keeps people stuck a long time, is this idea that, hey, I have no reference point to compare
Right.
besides my current life.
Yes,
in my
exactly.
situation.
Exactly. I mean, I just didn't. And I feel the need to leap into a little bit of a story that literally just happened. So I just got done on a call with a coaching client. I'm a boundaries coach. And I was relating this story to her about when I realized the effect of boundaries in my life. This deep, like what has happened for me is as I've developed healthy boundaries, is it's almost like this energetic boundary has developed around me whereby I can hold on to my yummy, good, juicy energy when I'm having a great day, even when there's chaos around me, and even when somebody I love around me is really upset. Not possible before recovery, before boundaries. And I was in the car with my sweetheart on the way home from a fantastic, amazing 10-day vacation. First time we ever went on vacation. And we had a phenomenal time. And he's driving and he gets irritated in traffic. I no longer do. That's a huge benefit of my recovery. And then he was hungry and then he had to go to the bathroom. So he was really getting riled up. We get off to go to a rest stop. It's 3:45 in the afternoon and the restroom's closed at 3:30 and he loses it. And I go, yeah. And I could watch myself because I know what I would have done in the past is I would have said, well, I'm sure that they're closed because there's budget cuts. Because I'm trying to like fix the situation or make him feel better. And in that moment, I realized that's what I would have said. And what that would have done is put him on the defensive and we would have had conflict. And I would have blamed him. And he would have blamed me. But instead, I zipped it. And I was like, yeah. So then we got down the road and the next exit, we found a restaurant. He was able to go to the bathroom. And the whole time I was like, I am a new person. I am a new woman. Like, first of all, I'm joyful. I did not feel the need to lower my energy to match his energy. I did not feel the need I didn't absorb his feelings. I didn't feel his feelings. Like that was a miracle. And then after he got some food in him, he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and I had to pee. And in recovery, we say halt. Like you need to halt if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And if you're more than one of those, like you need to take care of that, like take care of the physical body. So that's a good illustration of, I didn't know that I was absorbing other people's energy. I didn't know that I was saying things that I thought were helpful that were actually causing conflict. I didn't know that I could hold on to my good energy when other people were around. I didn't know that I was lowering my energy. Like I didn't know any of that until I did because I wasn't doing it. So like those are examples of like what does recovery feel like and look like.
The idea that's just booming in my head is a lot of people confuse empathy with the lack of boundaries, it sounds like.
So, it's funny that you say that because what I just said to this very same client is I'm empathetic still, but I'm not an empath.
Yes.
And maybe I don't have those definitions right, but that feels like a great way to talk about it. Like I can tell what that must feel like for you, but I'm not feeling it for you, which is what I used to do.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, especially like working in human services, a lot of people like coworkers will be, will claim this role or claim this characteristic of being an empath, and then they get burnt out.
Right.
You know
because
what I mean?
they don't have healthy boundaries.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm starting to do is more like public speaking, and I want to speak with people in helping professions because I volunteered, former volunteer-holic, for 13 different nonprofit organizations. And I saw it all the time. Either employees or volunteers take on more than any human could ever possibly handle. They get burnt out. And then some of them leave, which means they take their labor and their institutional knowledge with them. We don't want that. We want people coming to this place because they feel like I have a cup that's overflowing and I want to pour from the overflow. Not I have a cup and it's really empty, but I'm going to give you the last thing I have. Because, like, we want people to contribute from their best,
Right.
you know, not from the bottom of the drain kind of thing, you know.
I think that idea is not talked about. But not even I think. I know that idea is not talked about enough in human services, especially because I think that's like the badge of honor when you just dive into all your clients and take everything on and,
Right.
you know.
Well, we have this myth in our society that it is somehow noble to not put yourself first. I mean, we don't say it's noble to neglect yourself, but that's essentially the message. Like, self-care is selfish. No, it's not. Self-preservation, it's selfless. Because, like I said, the only way that I can pour from the overflow is if I fill my cup. And the way to do that is to take care of yourself and to have healthy boundaries and say, not today, or not doing that. Or,
Yeah, and it's fascinating because I do think that we're moving in a positive direction when it comes to ideas of self-care. But I use that term intentionally, meaning an idea versus reality are two wildly different things. And this is something that is becoming more talked about. But certainly with, I was at a conference not long ago, and I was with a lot of just individuals who are significantly older than me. And they were all bragging about, I haven't taken a sick day ever. And I'm sitting here like, that seems insane. Like, when I'm sick, I shut it down because I'd rather miss 3 days of life than 3 weeks of life. And that's how it used to be. I would get out of surgery and I'd be at work the next day and I'd wonder why I was having 14 surgeries, right?
Yeah.
And fortunately, I feel like at a relatively young age, I figured like it's sunk cost when you give what you don't have. But it was really interesting. And then unfortunately, one of the people that I was with like passed away like a month later. And it was just like
Really?
that. And it was like this really eye-opening experience of, they were bragging about this, and I'm sitting back like I couldn't contribute to the conversation because I wanted to be like, you guys are crazy. But it was just this really eye-opening thing of like, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be there to take care of anyone else.
Right.
To dive back in, it sounds like you, for lack of better terms, almost stumbled across this wonderful program
Precisely.
in ACA, right?
Like higher powered.
Yeah. I was like, hey, it just kind of this took place, and now all of a sudden I begin to build a lot of awareness. I developed these new reference points. When was it that you decided that you wanted to embark in this career of giving what was given to you?
So that's actually a really cool story. But before I tell that, I want to say a little bit more about 12-step recovery, because I'm in another program, which is called Overeaters Anonymous. So interestingly, when I decided to quit going to CODA, I went on a Monday night. This is back when everybody did things in person all the time. So I went to a Monday night CODA meeting, and I was like, you know what? I'm not doing it. I'm not going to these meetings anymore because they're not really helping me. Maybe I'll pick up another ACA meeting. Well, it turned out that my higher power had a different idea, because one of the women that I was doing the steps with in ACA was trying to get me into Overeaters Anonymous. I didn't know that's what she was trying to do, but she had started talking about the way that she thought about food and her food behaviors and stuff. And I remember being like, oh my God. And it wasn't what she was doing or thinking. It was that she was talking about it. So I was like, oh, I do that. So fast forward, I got into Overeaters Anonymous. I'm now down over 100 pounds from my top weight. We call it abstinent in that program. That's the equivalent of being sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I've been an abstinent since April of 2016. So for over 7 years, I've been at my goal weight for 5.5 years. And interestingly, a lot of what I learned about boundaries wasn't just from the ACA and CODA. It was also from having a food program, because number one, a food plan is a boundary. I eat these things. I don't eat those things. I eat this much food. I don't eat more than that much food. But also, people like to push food on you, especially when you're heavy, because they think you're going to eat it. So I had to learn how to assert my boundaries with people in a certain way. So I happen to be a compulsive overeater and sugar addict. So I do not eat sugar. So when I started, I would say no.
Never.
So I don't eat refined sugar. So I don't eat And so people say like, oh, do you eat fruit? Yes, I eat fruit. But if food has a label on it, if sugar is item number 5 or higher, I do not eat it. I personally try not to eat a lot of things with labels on them. But so I had to find a way to talk about it. So I would say to people, I don't eat sugar. Well, then I turned into a research project for them. Well, what about sugar? And what about this? And what about that? And I was like, I don't really want to get into my details. So then I would say, I don't eat sweets. And they're like, oh my God, you're so good. How do you manage? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm an addict and I'm in recovery for it. That's how I handle it. And now what I say is, I have food issues. Most people don't pry because we got people that got celiac disease. We got vegans. We got paleo people. Like, no, people are not going into the, so it was like, I had to figure out, and I also had to learn how to refuse people without giving in, because like, this is, my life is at stake here. Like, I need you to hear me when I say no and no thank you. And I also had to learn like how to go to a potluck. I tried like, okay, I'll only have 3 different things or only 1 serving. And what I finally hit on is when I go to a potluck, I will bring an item and contribute it, and I will bring my own food that is pre-portioned, and I will eat that, because that's like a alcoholic going to a trough of booze, with a straw, like they're ready, like I'm not doing it. So like learning boundaries came from like all of my 12-step programs.
Is that something that rents space still you're saying we're almost 7 years in it, sounds like, is it something that's a conscious thought, or is it really this automatic thing where it's like, I just don't do that?
So I will say it like this. The compulsion has been lifted.
Okay.
So it does not rent space.
Yeah. And
there are little things here and there from time to time. Like I'll get a flash of a thought, but I'm like connected enough to my higher power to be able to like overcome that. But the compulsion has been lifted.
And let's bring that full circle for those who don't know, because I think that's something that's pretty unanimous across any type of addiction, right? With obsession and compulsion. So can you just touch on that a little bit? Because I think that's good.
Yeah, I'll give an example that I think will illustrate it. So when I first got into recovery, I was still working full-time at Yale. And the building that I worked in had a reception area that you had to walk through to get to the kitchen. And for as long as I can remember, there was always a bowl of candy on the corner of the reception desk. And so this one day, I don't know how far into my OA recovery I am. I walk through, I go to the kitchen, and then I come back, and I'm like, oh my God. When I walked through the first time, I didn't feel that visceral pull by the bowl of candy that I have felt my entire life. It was gone. And I was like, oh, what is, like, this is miracle. This is a miracle. I don't think I understood that I had that pull.
That's recovery.
Until I didn't have it. That is recovery. That's what I mean by the obsession has been lifted. Yeah,
it's a super freeing feeling, and what's beautiful too is so many individuals can come to that in different avenues, but they'll share those same feelings surrounding it, which is I think the beauty of human behavior and humans in general. With that, can we dive into how you made that segue into, because I am just super I'm really genuinely fascinated by your story.
Yeah. It's actually a really cool story. I mean, I know it's mine. Whatever. It's really cool. My story is a story of like serendipity. Like one of my many affirmations is I live by serendipity, taking opportunity of chances with, okay. I say it every day and I can't come out and say it here.
It's after 5. It's after 5.
Yeah. That shouldn't really matter. I live by serendipity, taking advantage of opportunities as they arise without fear. That's been an affirmation of mine for a very long time.
Bravery.
It works.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, I was working at Yale University. I was a program coordinator for urban education programs, mostly college access programs. The last 10 years was really just in Bridgeport, but I had also run programs in New Haven and Hartford. And I was a behind the scenes person, coordinator, also a research background and all that stuff. Anyway, got laid off, was lucky enough. I'd been there for so long. I got 8 months of salary continuation. And then this colleague of mine, Patricia Simon, had come there and work with us on this project as a postdoctoral fellow. And she got promoted to a new faculty member, and she got this grant that's called Innovation to Impact, which is funded by NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And it was to teach entrepreneurship to substance use researchers. And Patricia and I had been working together while she was a postdoc, and I helped her really think through how to do her research study in a way that she'd be much more likely to get data and get people to follow through and do, like, I helped her put structure in place. Mm-hmm. And so when she was writing this grant, she had to come to me and said, I need your ideas and all that. So 2 days before I got laid off, we were going to have lunch. And we have lunch, and she says to me, we got the grant. And every time I've been on a project, pardon me, as a grad student, I got there and the project was already in process. So I didn't have to start anything from scratch. So I've never started something from scratch. I need your brain. Can I do this? So I looked over her grant and all that, and I was like, listen, if you can get people who can hit the ground running, absolutely. But if you have to train people up from zero, no. Because at Yale, it's like, we got this person for 17%. We got this person for 15%. We got this person for 20%. There's no, like, you got 3 full-time people. That's not how it works. So I was like, you know what? I've got this salary continuation. We might be getting another grant, and we won't find out in 3 months. I'll volunteer for you, like, I don't know, 4 hours a week for the next 3 months. So I started volunteering for her, and I volunteer at the Yale Entrepreneurial Bazaar for this project to start promoting it. And I meet Oni Obiocha. I don't know if you guys know him. He is now the executive director of CT Next here in Connecticut. But at the time, he was the director of innovation at Dwight Hall at Yale. So Dwight Hall at Yale is the student-run organization to promote social justice. And I was like, hold the phone. Why is there a director of innovation? This is amazing, but why is there a director of innovation at Dwight Hall? And we hit it off, and I started volunteering for him too. And it turned out he was also a mentor in residence at Sci City, which City stands for Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. I didn't know that at first. And so what happened was I got connected to the world of entrepreneurship, startups, and innovation at Yale and in New Haven because of these 2 people. And I'm like, oh my God, these are my people. Holy shit. Because honestly, there is so much overlap between the world of recovery and entrepreneurship. First of all, you have to learn how to bounce back real quick or you're going to die. Like, you can't make it as an entrepreneur if you cannot screw up and pick yourself back up and dust yourself off and move forward. And in recovery, you are literally going to die, depending, like if you're an alcoholic or an addict, you're going to die if you don't pick yourself up. Right. And there's a growth orientation. There's a we can do it orientation. There's just and I was like, oh my God, these are my people. So we didn't end up getting the grant. I ended up, having more time to volunteer for Oni and Patricia. Meanwhile, I'm looking for jobs. And I come across this job at Sci City. That's the director of like mentorship networks and something like that. And I read the job description. I'm like, oh my God, this is me. Because I'm a connector. And it was all about connecting. So I just acted like that was already my job. And I just started doing the job. I started making connections with people, finding out about all this stuff, doing all these things. Because I was like, I want this job like I never wanted a job before in my life. And so I'm meanwhile applying for other jobs, don't get jobs. My salary continuation time is about to end. I finally go to Patricia and Oni. I'm like, I got to stop volunteering because I need to like hammer down on trying to get a job. And so I do a debrief with Oni, and he says to me, and he knows what I've been doing with this, like pretending this is my job. He's like, tell me why you don't have your own coaching and consulting business, because that's what you do. And I was like, not the first time that I've thought of having my own business. In fact, in 2014, I had made some pretty serious strides in creating a small business that was something to do with small businesses, helping them with like their paperwork or forms. I didn't know. And I did a survey among entrepreneurs and all this stuff. And the conclusion I came up with at that time is I am a self-starter when I work for other people, but not when I work for myself. So I gave up on it.
Was that like a confidence piece?
No, it was like I don't follow through for myself.
Oh, so the accountability.
Yeah, like okay. I will just screw myself over and not follow through for myself, and that was life before recovery.
I was gonna say that.
So Oni and I have this conversation on a Tuesday. On Thursday, I get an email from Yale telling me I'm not getting interviewed for that job. I start boo-hooing for like 2 minutes and I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe this was all about me supposed to start my own business. The next day, my friend Andrea, who lives in Cape Cod, who I met at an ACA meeting, is coming down to New Haven. She was supposed to come the week before, but something happened to her leg and she couldn't come. Another serendipitous moment. She comes down to see me and she stays overnight. We go to an ACA meeting. The next morning we go to breakfast and I'm telling her all this whole week things that's happened. And she says to me, okay, you've done more in the last year unemployed than I have. And I work for myself. So you got to stop saying that you're not a self-starter for yourself. That was before recovery. And I went, oh my goodness, you're right. Complete mind shift. Like I had this old idea about myself, even though I had evidence that it wasn't true, but I needed someone else to reflect it back to me to see that it was no longer true. So she says to me, just find out where people are doing business stuff and just go there. Like just Google business meetings in New Haven. So I'm like, all right. So I Google business meetings in New Haven. 3 things come up for me. 1, SCORE, Service Corps of Retired Executives. It's an arm of the Small Business Administration, free training and mentorship for small business people. I sign up for a half-day workshop about beginning a new business. 2, Toastmasters International. This is a public speaking organization. I know deep down inside, if I could do whatever I want, motivational speaker. So I'm like, I'm going to sign up for that. And number 3, there was a workshop at the Grove, which is no longer around, but it was the first co-working place in the state of Connecticut. It was in downtown New Haven. And there was a workshop there that was called something like debunking your subconscious scripts about money. And I was like, I got money issues, so I need to go to that. So I go to that. And the woman who's leading it, doesn't really do the best job in delivering the workshop because she's not listening to what's being said in the room. So, for example, a woman in the room says, well, I'm a creative, and we all know that creative careers aren't lucrative. And I was like, excuse me, I think that is the exact thing we're here to debunk. And like the workshop leader didn't acknowledge or say it or anything like that.
Did anyone mention like Uber?
No.
Or any startup in the entire
Right.
universe?
So I go, well,
in Silicon
actually,
Valley?
I just yesterday listened to a 13-minute podcast on how to undo your subconscious scripts. And it's like 5 steps. I'll be happy to share it with you afterwards. And
Please.
they're like, can you share it with us right now? And I'm like, not my workshop. So the woman's like, go ahead. So I flipped to the previous page of my notebook and I'm like, here are the steps. And then the woman who's the host from the Grove says, if you send me the podcast episode later, I'll send it out to everybody and all that. So I get this idea. I'm like, okay, that's not my topic. And I could have facilitated that group better than she did. How do I do groups here at the Grove? So I go back and I connect. That woman's name was Christina that said, send out the email. I connect with her. And when I get her email, it says she's the director of culture. I'm like, that is a cool title. So I said to her, what does that mean to be the director of culture? And how do I plug into the culture here? So by the time I walk out, she says, I'm quote, hired to be a community animator. So for those who don't know, co-working places, an animator has nothing to do with like drawing animation. It's like you animate the community. You create the vibe of the day. You're like the host for the day. Mm-hmm. So they had a work exchange program whereby you give them a 6-month commitment. You give them 1 day a week. And for that, you get free membership in the place. So you can have meetings. You can use the meeting rooms. You can co-work there. Like rub elbows with other entrepreneurs. And I was like, I'm in, I'm sold. And I just started doing stuff. And I met Caroline and Margaret from Collab. I don't know if you guys know Collab. It's a boost program for entrepreneurs in New Haven. Yep. And because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I met with Margaret and I said, I want to be a coach. And I thought I wanted to coach small business people who were in recovery. And then I was like, I'm not a business coach. And then I'm like, some people in recovery don't want people to know they're in recovery. So, but that it took me a while to figure that out. But anyway, I remember I met with Margaret and I said, yeah, I don't know how to coach. And this is what she said to me: Barb, you don't get better at something by not doing it. And I'm like, okay, that seems patently obvious when you say it. And that is actually something that I teach my clients all the time. Like, they want to know how to set boundaries without setting boundaries. And I'm like, I can tell you all the stuff you want, but you got to actually set some boundaries to get better at setting boundaries.
And the thing that keeps coming through my mind as you speak is like the old saying, 90% of life is just showing up. It's like, hey, I'm going to sign up for these two things. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to make the connections. I'm going to put one step in front of the other.
Yep.
A day at a time, do what's in my control. And before you know it,
Consistency.
it builds. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Another, like, I love quotes. Consistency in small things is no small thing. In fact, it's the hardest thing in the world. And I think for me, I realized the reason consistency used to be so hard for me is that when you do something like beginning something is always the hardest part. So you have to begin and begin and begin and begin. But that's why habit matters, because once something becomes a habit, it's effortless.
Yeah.
It's also setting aim, right? And I think that's something that, if I'm hearing this right, the self-help really helped, because all of a sudden I'm doing things intentionally, right? I'm really paying attention to how things happen. And yeah, I think where people struggle with consistency, with routine, with habit, with all these fundamental things that allow one to optimize their life, it's, hey, I'm not setting intention, right? And I'm not making things sacred. I'm not making things non-negotiable. And if you talk to most individuals in self-help, right, or who are engaged in any form of self-help, it's, hey, showing up is non-negotiable, right? Making phone calls is not negotiable. Setting intentions, prayer or reflection, whatever one wants to call it. Like, these are these just non-negotiable parts, and you do that for a couple weeks, and that's really, like, they say 3 weeks to build a habit. I think it's like 10 days, right?
Yeah,
like
I don't think there's a number.
No,
because everybody's different.
It clicks,
Right. Yeah.
and it clicks, and where people, at least I always take notes, because I really try to make it so the time that I'm not in a good routine gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And like, that's how I define success for me.
Yeah. I love that.
And one of the things I write through it all is like, hey, if you get out of a routine, to get back into a routine, patience and persistence, right? Because I get out and I think, I do all the things I'm supposed to do, and I'm all of a sudden going to feel as good as I did on day 20 of my last routine. Well, it doesn't work that way. But if I do it a day at a time, the feeling always follows. But you can't stop before you get the feeling. And I think that is where, for me especially, I'd give up so much, because it'd be like, I want the results now,
Right.
Yeah.
versus just patience and persistence. So I just wanted to interject
I
there.
got another quote. So it's a slow process. Quitting won't speed it up. Like, every human change process is slow. At least it feels slow, even if it's not. And I think, I've changed so many behaviors and areas of my life. Like, I declared bankruptcy in 1999 when my student loans came due, because I had so much credit card debt because of my codependence. Because I was either trying to buy people's affection, I was trying to keep up with the Joneses and manage my image, or I was trying to rescue, fix, and save people. So when I, over the next 9 years, I cleaned up my finances so much that I bought a condo. Was it 9 years? Yeah, 9 years. It took me to do that, right? So I've done that. I've lost weight many times, but I've lost it and maintained it. I came out of victim mentality. I built healthy boundaries. I didn't used to be honest, though I thought I was an honest person. I am a woman of honesty and integrity. I used to drink really fucking heavily. I used to smoke bales of weed. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. I take really good care of myself. I make my bed every day. I eat breakfast every day. I plan my food. I do my laundry, I do the dishes, and I clean them, and I empty the dishwasher every day. Like, I couldn't do any of those things with any consistency before. And I think one of the most important things that I figured out that I later learned as a principle in habit building, which is if you have something you already do, it's easier to connect something to a thing you're already doing. So just stack it on, I've heard it, habit stacking is what I've later heard. And I'm like, oh, I figured that out on my own. So for me, one of the things that I started doing early was I started gratitude journaling. Actually, last month was my 23rd anniversary of nightly gratitude journaling. 23 years.
Wow.
So every night, gratitude journaling. So that was a nighttime thing. And then sometime around there, I don't really know when it started, I started having a daily meditation book. So I had a morning practice. So then when I got into recovery, I could throw some prayer in the morning when I was doing my reading. And then when I got to step 10 in recovery, where you like inventory your day and stuff, I had my gratitude journal open. I just went through my day to figure out what do I need to be grateful for? What do I get to be grateful for? So I've just reviewed my day. So it's easy to do my inventory. You know, like it's easy to just stack things onto other things. So what I teach my clients is, you know, like let's say you want to start reading a meditation book every day. Well, what's something you do every day? Probably brush your teeth. How about you set your toothbrush on top of the meditation book? You know, something like that. And then the cool thing about the habits, when they're good habits, is you not only get the satisfaction of I'm doing something I told myself I was going to do, you get the benefit of that reading or of ridding yourself of the guilt that you had from the thing you did that day, and you figure it out in your inventory and you're like, I'm going to apologize to that person tomorrow. So it's the same thing with boundaries too. You get the satisfaction of I set this boundary with this person. I finally showed up for myself and I said no when I meant no. And then you get the benefit of the actual boundary of not having to do the thing that you don't want to do, you know? So it's the same thing with the habit building. And it's, I feel like, you know, essentially as a coach, I'm a behavior change specialist. You know, I've never said that out loud before, but I think that's, you know, that's really what it is. But you have to first like see what are my patterns so that I can change them.
Yeah. And it's I'm glad that you mentioned the habit stacking. I think a really good resource for people, Atomic Habits. That book is
I haven't read it,
brilliant.
but I've heard great things
and
about it.
And it has a bunch of worksheets. Really, it's really practical. But something how I like to conceptualize patterns is basically like, hey, if you chunk up the day, you have a morning, you have an evening, and then you have your core of the day that's often centered around something that takes up a large chunk of time, right? Well, if you focus on doing one piece in building a morning routine, which can be as simple as, hey, I'm going to take a couple minutes to pray or set intention for whatever that is, right? I'm gonna read a passage of one of the just for today type passages. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of books like that. If you can link that, go ahead. No.
I just something that just running through my mind. I just want to ask, about your morning routine. I like to eat clean. Like I'm big on that. You know what I mean?
Plant-based.
Yes, yes, very much so. So, can you just, for our listeners, just describe what a typical breakfast look like?
So I drink smoothies every day for breakfast that I make myself.
What's in the smoothies?
Every one of them has a mix of frozen spinach and kale. I have a certain protein powder that I use. I put in chia seeds, apple cider vinegar. I use almond milk, and then whatever the fruit is changes. And sometimes I put other things, sometimes it's like fruit and coconut flakes or fruit and cacao powder, you know, something like that. But that's what I do every day. It works for me. I've done that for years. Even before recovery, I did that, but they had a lot more crappy stuff in them before I was in recovery. And It works for me. Like, I live alone. I've lived alone most of my adult life, and I threw so much produce out. And so to be able to take frozen ingredients and make food for them every day. So I get to have fruit every day. And typically things that are frozen are better, have more nutrients in them than things that have been sitting on the shelf for a week. So, it's a way for me to get lots of different nutrients. Like, I'm not going to squirt apple cider vinegar in anything else. It's going to be disguised in a smoothie. I'm not going to, I might throw chia seeds on something, but
yeah, not more often than not is during a smoothie. And so what does dinner look like?
So it's different all the time. Right now, I just a couple weeks ago, I love to cook, but I've gotten I'm tired of the chopping. I'm busy.
Yeah, meal prepping.
So I decided, because I listened to the podcast, the Adult Child podcast, which is amazing, by the way. And she has an ad on there. She started using it and you can get a discount. So I was like, let me try that. That was not what I wanted, because all it took away from me is grocery shopping. All the prep is still required. So then I was talking to Julia. Do you guys know Julia Gambale? Used to be Julia Gooch. So she's at the known co-working also. So she was she's vegetarian. I've been eating plant-based since December because of my cholesterol, and it was actually a really easy transition, which is amazing. She goes, you should try Daily Harvest. It's vegan, and also it's prepared meals. They're just frozen. And so I got them last week, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I decided I'm going to order more. I'm going to stretch it out and augment it with my own stuff. But, I eat plant-based. So I eat a lot of black beans are my favorite, and chickpeas. I learned we don't need anywhere near as much protein. People always say, what do you get for protein? I'm like, there's protein in bread. You don't need as much protein as you think that you do. So I eat a lot of vegetables.
Cooked or raw?
I'm mostly cooked though.
Okay.
I sometimes eat raw. I'm not a raw food eater or anything like that. But I eat 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. So my evening snack is always fresh fruit and mixed nuts, which I buy raw mixed nuts. I buy raw nuts and I mix them myself. Go Trader Joe's. They got the cheapest nut prices and the largest variety of raw nuts. And then my afternoon snack is frequently toast, which is Ezekiel bread, Teddy's natural peanut butter, and a banana and almond milk. Or sometimes it's fat-free Greek yogurt with usually frozen berries. And then, my meals vary, but I love a lot of one dish meals. I love a casserole kind of thing, because you can just throw so many vegetables in there. And here's another funny thing. Since I got into recovery, I cannot tell you how much I love me some steamed broccoli with just a little bit of salt, or some steamed asparagus. My mouth is literally watering right now. That never happens before recovery. I liked those things, but first of all, there needed to be a lot of butter on them, But there was no craving or anything like that. It's just because I'm not caked with sugar in my mouth, I suppose. And so my taste buds have opened up and I just crave nutrients, So
I think the reason and thank you for sharing that. I think I just really want to highlight that, because I think that gets coupled with establishing and having a consistency of those habits. Because when you eat like shit, you wake up sluggish. You
don't sleep well.
Yeah,
right,
you don't sleep well. You get up
sleep.
late. You're right. Everything is sluggish. You don't plan.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
So I think I think for our listeners, because a lot of things, one of our main points of following up is to give tangible advice that everyone can do, and the gratitude journal, the affirmations, those are super important.
Planning, they say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's essentially the truth. If you cannot have a well-lived life by winging it. It's not going to happen.
Agreed.
You have to plan something, and so what's important to you? Start with that, I would actually like to say something about the gratitude journaling, because I learned about it from, what was the name of that book? Some book, whatever, long time ago. Simple Abundance, Sarah Von Bronick or something like that is her name. And she said, Write 5 things every day you're grateful for. And in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, I cannot come up with 5 things that I'm grateful for. But it was good to have a minimum because that stretches you. And it's in the stretching that the real good juiciness comes out. But what happened for me over time was I started, like, of course, reviewing my day and realizing, oh, there's all these little places where I have all these things to be grateful for that I just never really paid attention to. And so I started going through my day and being like, oh, that's going to my gratitude journal. And that's going to my gratitude journal. And that's going to my gratitude journal. And then, like, I personally have suffered from some really debilitating episodes of depression in my life. It's like the worst. And so when that is like everything is shit and everything sucks, but I still did my gratitude journal. And what I found was it doesn't matter how shitty things are, there is always something to be grateful for. And in those worst times, I started being grateful for things like I have access to clean water. I live in a house. There is heat. We have windows. We have screens. Like years and years and years ago, there were no screens. People had bugs in their houses all the time. I can breathe the air here. I had asthma as a teenager. It was really tough to catch my breath. Things that I used to take for granted. I remember somebody I know told me that they were traveling in South America. I don't remember, some remote area. And they said, is it true that people in North America bathe in drinking water? And she was like, no. And then she was like, wait a minute. Actually, yes, we do. The quality of the water that we shower with is better than the drinking water of many people in this world. So be grateful that you have access to clean water. So that gratitude practice has revolutionized my life. It's given me a whole new perspective. Because remember, I said in the beginning, I had a hard time coming up with 5 things for which to be grateful. Now, once I got in recovery, I upped it to 10, which is because 5 was so easy. Okay. It was just like, oh, I don't even have to try for this. So I do 10 things. Sometimes it's more, but minimum of 10 things that I'm grateful for. And it's given me this stance on life. So I started that practice in July of 2000. Sometime in 2002, I had been dating this guy. We fell in love like you read about. And out of the blue, he dumped me. And I immediately said, I'm going to write down all the reasons I'm grateful that I met him. And then he came back, and then he asked me to marry him. And then he dumped me again. And up until that point in my life, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was absolutely devastated. And I again went back to gratitude journaling. Because that's who I am. That I had already become that in the first couple of years. And then in 2018, I was in recovery at this point in time. I took a 6-week solo road trip in a camper van out west. And I rented it through outdoorsy.com. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like an Airbnb for RVs. So people rent you their RVs.
Really?
And this van was such a piece of shit. That in the first 2.5 weeks, it broke down so many times.
Yikes.
That it saw 4 different mechanics, one of whom it saw 3 times. And the owner put over $2,000 of repairs in it. And I ended up ditching it in Holbrook, Arizona. And yet, I had a magnificent vacation.
Wow.
Now, don't get me wrong. It sucked when those things happened. There were moments like the first time that it broke down on the side of the desert highway. Notice I said first time.
Right.
I was scared. And I was like, okay, this is my worst fear realized right here. But because of this stance of gratitude, I was like, oh my God. So the first like 25 seconds after it broke down, I couldn't get a cell signal. And I was like, I'm going to die. Right. And then all of a sudden I got a cell signal. That morning, my friend Miranda had taught me how to share my location via Google that morning. So I was able to share my location with the roadside assistance people so they could find me in the middle of the freaking desert in New Mexico. And so I was like super grateful for that. I was so grateful that like I have a phone signal. The vehicle wouldn't move, but it was still running, and there was air conditioning because I'm in the middle of the freaking desert in the middle of the sun. And then a little while later, a police officer came up, and she ended up staying with me until the tow truck came and stuff. And I'm like, so many strangers were so kind and helpful to me so many times on this trip. Yeah. It was just like my gratitude journal was just filled.
The world's a great place, and I think that gets overlooked. Like, and again, I think given people's professions too, it can become very narrow, right? Like if I work amongst chaos, I think the world is chaotic, and I forget that there are 8 billion people on this planet. I think, and maybe that's also just my mentality, that I just think people are amazing and people want to help and they want to do good. I do want to kind of push a little bit in saying like, hey, I was broke down, stranded. It was such a great trip, and like gratitude being the core of that. I think too, also what I hear there, that's such an advanced skill, is the ability to not react, but to respond, to be able to take a step back and to have some level of emotional regulation, right?
Yes.
Because I think gratitude, the way you stated it, it made it seem like gratitude was the pillar that carried it. And I think it's one of multiple skills. And I kind of want to touch on that, because the ability to be able to analyze one's thoughts, to be able to put things into perspective and not dive with the first feeling that is 9 times out of 10, right? It's created by a cognitive distortion or distorted thought that is absolutely inaccurate, right? But we believe it because that feeling is so real. So how did you develop, and what are the skills, and then how did you develop and be able to apply them in your life?
Okay, so in ACA we call that emotional sobriety, which is the goal of the program. So I mentioned that there's a list of 14 traits, which we affectionately call the laundry list. And one of them is, or actually one of the promises of that program is that we will become actors rather than reactors in our lives. So I want to say a couple of things about that. One, I alluded to earlier that I have victim mentality. I don't any longer. Well, I mean, I probably will always have it to some degree, but like that has been for me the biggest paradigm shift. So, and I'm not the quintessential victim. That kind of person, a quintessential victim, is like, woe is me, the world is happening to me, everything is against me. It's not just the world that's against me, it's the universe that's against me. I can't win. They're doing this to me. That's not me. Mine was a lot more subtle than that. But the way that I started to see it was when I was doing my relationship inventory in the 12 steps. So I happen to be a heterosexual woman. So everybody I've dated was a guy. So it was like, well, when I looked at these relationships, well, if he would just fill in the blank, then everything would be okay. Well, if he would just, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. So I'm acting like I got nothing to do with the status of the relationship. And then once I saw that in those relationships, I saw that in my 19-year codependent relationship with my boss. I saw that in my friendships. I saw that in my family. And then the world opened up. And I mentioned earlier, like, I'm a lot better driver now. I'm a lot more calm driver. I'm a very calm driver now. I used to act like if traffic was happening to me or at me. Not traffic is happening, but it's happening to me. And so when I kind of rolled that back, it was like I had this subconscious belief, like there shouldn't be traffic on the highway when I'm driving. Meanwhile, highways built for traffic.
Right.
So I acted like I'm a victim of the traffic. So that becoming an actor instead of a reactor means coming out of victim mentality. And it means getting to have emotional sobriety. And I think the core for me is trauma recovery, because that's essentially what ACA is. It's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourselves and you heal through the 12 steps of recovery. I didn't know that I was traumatized. So what I learned when I first got in the program, I heard people talking about trauma, and I'm like, so when I was 17, I had a traumatic event with my dad. My dad tried to strangle me, and I knew that was traumatic. There's no question that I knew that. But this is what I thought. I was like, I was grown. I was practically grown. Like this is adult children of alcoholics. This is about things that happen. I was like, how much could that have affected me? So I didn't think that they were talking to me, but I was clear. I have the traits. I'm not sure what's going on here. It wasn't until I started to understand that the absence of good things happening can result in trauma that I was like, oh, So what happened to me, I've since learned, is called relational trauma. So this is like the continual like drip, drip, drip of emotional invalidation. And so, and also like my parents literally did the best they could. I believed that intellectually when I got into recovery. Like I deeply and emotionally, internally understand that now. It is not okay, the things that they did. But they couldn't do anything better because they didn't know how.
When you understand that at a foundational, fundamental level, it makes the world a better place because you recognize that every person you come in contact with, there's no choice in what they're right. They are just doing.
People are not evil; they're wounded and broken,
And that's it. And they're
in
no
pain.
one chooses where they're born. And pretty much how I've began to look at it is like we're all normally a product of like 4 people. And if we're lucky, we get exposed to people that we're attracted to that for the right reasons, right? And they expose us to more insight and new awareness, right? Help build the awareness. And hopefully that continues to progress through each developmental stage. But if you're unlucky, you are getting programmed with absolute shit. And how do you expect to turn out any other way? Like and it's really, really unfortunate and unlucky. But it is the way that human development occurs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I think it's really the trauma recovery that got me to be able to be an actor, not a reactor. But there's also so many more things like the awareness that I had victim mentality, the awareness that I didn't have boundaries, and then learning how to build them and taking responsibility for my part in things. So, like if people know anything about the 12 steps of recovery, they probably have heard you take a searching and fearless moral inventory, which is step 4, and they probably heard that you make amends, which is step 9. Step 4, where you take a searching and fearless moral inventory, to me was the greatest gift because that's where I got to see my part in things. And what that means is I could see all the fucked up stuff that happened in my life, how much of it I was contributing to. Like I realized there was a lot of things that I was either putting myself in harm's way, not protecting myself from places and people and things that I knew were bad for me, that, you know, I was creating chaos or exacerbating the chaos going on around me. And when you see that, some people think, oh my God, I'm like awful or what. Now I'm like, oh my God, I can stop doing it. Like it's such a gift to see what you're doing, because if you don't know you're doing it, you can't stop it. And here's the thing. If other people are the problem, are all the problem, like if you really are a victim of everything, you're screwed because there's nothing you can do about it. And I do want to say, just because like I'm talking about victim mentality, like most people with victim mentality have actually been victimized. They got it from somewhere, right? But you, just because you have been victimized does not mean you have to live with this mentality. Viktor Frankl, perfect example of that. If people don't know about him, he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychiatrist who was in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And he had been working on a study about, I don't even remember like the details of it, but he essentially learned and taught to other people and to himself in the concentration camps, I get to decide what I'm going to do with my thoughts. I can choose to help the other people. I can focus my energy on helping other people rather than hating the Nazis and rather than woe is me, right? So if that dude can not internalize victim mentality, then all of us can come out of it. Like we can be taught out of it. And it's actually because I'm a boundaries coach, a lot of the work I end up doing with my clients is getting them out of victim mentality, because when you learn to set boundaries, you're taking responsibility for your life. Like, I used to be like, oh my God, why do they keep asking me to help them? They've asked me 50 times. Well, you know why? Because I said yes 49 times. So chances are really high I'm going to say yes again, right? So I can't, but I would, like, I was like, I want to help. I think I'm nice. That's why I'm helping, because I'm nice. And then I get resentful. That's a really good clue that you need help with boundaries, by the way.
The best
if you
clue.
get resentful. And the thing is that you are abdicating your responsibility for your life. You're acting like they're supposed to read my mind and know that I actually mean no when I'm saying yes. No, no, no. And it's just, that's not a thing. Reading people's mind, unless you are an actual psychic, that's not a thing. And so taking responsibility to say, that doesn't work for me. I don't care for that.
I know for me, like one of my breakthroughs as changing when I was on the other side of the tracks was exactly that. I didn't label it as victim mentality, but that's exactly what it was. I blamed everyone else for my situation. It was everybody else's fault. And it wasn't until, and Ben, no, this is my favorite word, accountable, to say, oh, and that's one of the principles. I'm a Buddhist, so that's one of our principles is cause and effect. So the reason I'm going through whatever I'm going through, at some point there was a cause to create this, and now I have the opportunity to change that cause and create a new effect. And it wasn't until I realized it was I'm sitting in prison because of me, and not because of the person I was with, or not because the judge ain't like me, or because the cops. It was because of me. That gave me this sense of empowerment and gave me the opportunity to then say, okay, if I could put myself here, then I also could take myself out.
Nice. How did you make that shift though to out of victim mentality?
It definitely started in prison, reading Think and Grow Rich.
Oh,
That was the book that changed my life. Because I went through life basically even doing what my dad wanted me to do, or later on doing what my neighborhood wanted me to do, and never like putting myself first, the things I like to do. So I got to a point where like I was so unfulfilled, and through Think and Grow Rich, and to this day I don't even know how I came up with this, but instead of money, I took happiness, because I knew I never was truly happy. So instead of saying I'm gonna get $1 million, I want to be happy. And when I changed that word and started writing affirmations, started writing my 3-year goals and everything, it shifted. So now, you know what I mean? Now I'm in prison, just walking around, super happy, like
I'm
literally.
happy. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even the people around me notice the change. The people that's doing 20, 30, 40 years, like KP, don't you dare come back here. Like you got something with you. You going home, make sure you do right when you get there. And I think that coupled with the sense of I can do anything if I put my mind to it, just shifted it. And I knew it started with me, and one, believing in myself, and one, just understanding that I cause whatever happens going forward. You know what I mean? So that was everything. And that's what with Winning Ways, that's one of our principles is taking that personal responsibility and understanding you're in this situation because of you. And once you could take that off, sky's the limit. You know what I mean? Sky's the limit. But yeah, I resonate with that
Absolutely.
so much.
You both hit the nail on the head, right?
Yeah.
If you're a victim, like, you're done. There's
Right.
literally
Right.
0% chance of hope.
Right.
Zero.
Yeah.
And that's,
Well, not if you're a victim. If you have victim mentality.
Well, that's
yes.
what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there are victims who don't have it. And I don't know if there are people who have victim mentality that haven't been victimized, but it doesn't, like, you can still overcome the mentality, even if you have it and have been victimized. I mean, I'm living proof. Kevin is living proof. So many people in recovery I know are living proof. My clients are living proof that, you can come out of that mentality, and people without what is the opposite of victim mentality? I know what it is. Actually,
mindset.
So there's a book called The Empowerment Dynamic by David Emerald, and it's the antidote. So he talks about, I don't know if you guys, do you know the drama triangle, the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer? So that's called the drama triangle. And David Emerald came up with something he calls the empowerment dynamic. So the opposite of the victim is the creator. The opposite of the rescuer is the coach. And the opposite of the persecutor is there's another C word, coach, creator. I can't remember what it is right now. But when you come out of that mentality, you are a creator. You're creating your experience. So you're not an actor. You're not a reactor. You're an actor. So an actor, or creator, same kind of thing. So you're taking the reins of your life. You're taking the paintbrush and painting on the canvas rather than, that's not a good metaphor because I don't know how to continue that metaphor, but that wasn't a good one. But
Well, no, I think it is. It's rather than letting someone else do it.
yeah,
Someone else
okay,
holding your
there you go.
brush, you know
Someone
what I
else,
mean?
yeah, right. I was thinking painting you or something like that. But yeah.
You begin to do things intentionally.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And when everything is happening to you, it's impossible. You're at a massive disadvantage, and there really is, if we're being honest, like, yeah, you can have maybe semblance of quality of life, but you're never going to take ownership of your life. You're never going to experience recovery, right? You're just not going to.
I think it's just a beautiful. All this part of this podcast beautifully describes our I guess mantra or our slogan. Obstacles are opportunities.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Agreed. I think that obstacles are really, like, if you use the metaphor of traveling, an obstacle is really a detour. It's like the universe going, don't go that way, go this way.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to take another route.
Yeah.
And just if you look at anything that sustains human flourishing, it is because of obstacles that you get innovation, that you get, and that you can break that down on the micro level with the human, but also the macro level with society, right? Like, we have light, we have electricity, we have all of these things, we have these walls because of obstacles, right? Because of true suffering. So it's essential, and it's part of the path, right? Like, there's no one that has had an interesting, rewarding life just sat back and did nothing, right? Like, they put themselves in vulnerable situations where bad things happen in life,
they happen
right?
to everybody, no matter
what.
great their life is.
That's it.
Right? Like, I feel like my goal is really to be a model of what's possible in recovery. And I feel like I have really strong recovery. I still have a lot of stuff going on in my head that I got to clean up. I do a nightly inventory, and it, like step 10 says, continue to take personal inventory, and admitted when we were wrong. Like, the reason that is built in is because you're gonna screw up. Like, it is inevitable because you're a human and you're flawed. By the way, you're flawsome, not flawed. So I learned that word in recovery. And it was really important to me because I grew up somehow with the notion that, like, I'm not supposed to be flawed. And if I am, I got damn well better hide them. So I was, like, really defensive and had all these different facades up and stuff. And so when I heard the word flawsome, I was like, wait a minute. I can still be awesome and be flawed. And that and the other recovery stuff too really helped me to, like, let go of this need to project this image of, I'm going to say perfection. I'm not a perfectionist. I mean, I have perfectionistic tendencies, but not a perfectionist. But I don't need to project this image. I can just be. And when I started accepting myself and my own flaws, guess what? I became so much more accepting of other people's flaws, and I cut people slack. And actually, that just reminded me, back a little while ago in the conversation, I said something like, people aren't evil, they're wounded and broken.
Yes.
So I'm in ACA, adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. These are the people who have had the worst fucking shit happen to them that ever happens to humans. Children who have been trafficked and beaten and all kinds of stuff. And some of these people do some heinous shit because they are broken and wounded, and they heal. And then they become contributing citizens who reach back and help other people like them. So I don't ever think someone's a piece of shit. I can't stand it when people say, like, oh, he's a piece of shit. No, he's not. His behavior may be shitty, but he's not shitty. Like, I have so much more sympathy and empathy for everybody. Like, it is not okay, and I'm not going to tolerate that behavior on yours. But you are a blessing.
Yeah, you're doing what you know to do.
Right? And you can turn that ship around.
Yeah,
Grace.
yeah, and I think that's the other common, or I don't know if common is I was going to say common misconception, but I think anytime you're dealing with, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or any of the Anonymouses, right? Like, you're dealing with literally tens of millions of people, right? So you're going to get the most wonderful, amazing human beings in the world, and you're going to get the most suffering, painful human beings in the world, and everywhere in between. But everyone's trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get better. And I think that's the connection, that's the camaraderie. In the don't judge a book by its cover, give people grace, because
That's
at the end of the day, you don't know what they've been through. And again, you talk about the person who does the most heinous thing. Like, had I gone through what that person went through, what is the probability that I turn out the same way? And it's like, it's probably pretty high, right? And yeah, there is you can call it luck, you can call it faith, you can call it whatever, but there is something to this thing called life that there's fortune. There is definitely some level of fortune. So I have we're definitely a little over on time, but I have one more kind of question for you. You have so many different things going on with your podcast, Fragmented to Whole. I love that.
Yes.
Love that name right there. Life lessons from 12-step recovery, and then your coaching business. What excites you? What keeps you motivated? What keeps you going with as busy a plate and as long as you've been doing it for?
So step 12, part of step 12 is we carry the message of recovery to those who still suffer. That is the purpose of my life. And actually, I just met with this guy the other day who's a new co-working member at Known. And he's becoming a coach. And we had this really, really intense conversation. And I said to him, I could be struck deaf and dumb. I can still pray. Like, I will be carrying the message until I die. Because I tried. I did therapy. I did, like I told, self-help, retreats, workbook, like all that stuff, like scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life. Recovery melted the iceberg of my life. So for me, the 12 steps are where it's at. There's so much wisdom and tools and all kinds of stuff in 12-step recovery that is not making its way out into the world. And I didn't know, like, I looked on the outside like I had my shit together. I did not. And so, like, I want people to understand, like, as a boundaries coach, what I want people to understand is, like, boundaries probably would clean up all those issues of yours. They're so, because they permeate every area of your life. But when I started the podcast, I wasn't a boundaries coach. I was just a coach. I didn't even know what that meant. It never occurred to me my podcast would have anything to do with my business. It's the number one way that I get clients. Because they know me. But that, like, when people sign up for a call with me, they're like, I feel like I know you. And I'm like, do you listen to my podcast? And they go, yeah. I'm like, you do. Because that's me raw, So what excites me, is that what you said? The growth, I have growth, number one value, growth orientation, always had that. This is why I love being an entrepreneur. Okay. Other than 12-step recovery, the most self-development program you can ever have is to become an entrepreneur. Like, it's just like, you can't,
Agreed.
Nothing more than that. So I got the two top ones, that I'm doing. So my own growth orientation, which was, I believe, born in me before I was born, and then carrying the message of recovery to those who still suffer. For some reason, this just came in my head to say, healing people is a great way to make money. There's a lot of people out there that think it is unspiritual to make money. Bullshit. What better way to make money than healing other humans, changing the trajectory of someone's life? And here's the thing. When you heal one person, you heal their progeny. Like, you don't know how many generations of people are healed from there. So, like, the idea that I can save one person from one moment of suffering, like, I'm in. If I can get one person to change their perspective about themselves. I wrote down the other day on a sticky note and put it on my computer. I get people to believe in themselves. That's what I do. I get people to believe in themselves. Because if you don't believe in yourself, not going to have a good life.
Agreed.
And I thought I thought I liked myself. I think I had high self-esteem. What I think I learned in recovery was that I had low self-worth. Because when I looked at my behavior, that was not the behavior of a woman who felt worthy. That was not the behavior of a woman who loved herself. I truly, truly love myself now.
That's a beautiful thing. Truly a beautiful thing. And that's the recovery that you were talking about in the beginning. Where can people find you? How can they reach out?
Well, thank you for asking. So since you're already listening to a podcast, how about you hop on over to, in your same app, Fragmented to Whole,
Yes.
Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. Or if you're like, I don't know, driving or something, go to fragmentedtowhole.com. That'll take you there. My favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. And everything I have, you can find in either one of those will lead you to everything I have. I do group and private boundaries coaching, public speaking about boundaries, especially like to organizations. So specifically, like my signature speech is reduce overwhelm, burnout, and turnover, build better boundaries into your organization. So if you have an organization that needs to hear that message, I would love to talk to you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday evening with us.
This was I could literally talk to you guys forever.